I want to show you how to make thick, chewy udon noodles from just 3 basic ingredients, so stick around! Welcome back to No Recipes. I'm Mark Matsumoto, and I'm here to show you how to elevate your everyday meals. So smash that subscribe button and ring that bell so you don't miss out. There are tons of creation myths about how udon made its way into Japan, but most of them begin in China over 500 years ago. These days, there are dozens of regional variations, ranging from super thin, hand-pulled inaniwa-style udon to super thick hoto, which can be over an inch wide. Today, I want to show you the most common type of udon, which is made by rolling out the dough and cutting it into noodles with a knife. The ingredients for making udon noodles are just all-purpose flour, water, and salt. But the trick to turn these basic ingredients into those slick, chewy noodles that we all love is all in the technique. So let's jump right in. First, let's weigh out 400 grams of all-purpose flour. I always use weight measurements for flour because it can be compacted if you scoop it with a cup, which will totally throw off this recipe. You're also gonna want to weigh out the water for this. I'm using 180 grams, which is about 3/4 of a cup. But after I had a batch of dough turn out like this, I checked my measuring cups and they all hold different amounts of liquid. See how the water we just weighed isn't quite going up to the top of this cup? Now watch me transfer this to another 3/4 cup, and now it's overflowing. Small variations like this aren't usually a big deal, but the hydration of this dough needs to be precise or it's gonna end up too dry and crumbly or too wet and sticky. You'll also probably want to weigh out your salt. Both these cups have 17 grams, but the table salt on the left is only about a tablespoon, while the kosher salt on the right is 1.5 tablespoons. Now I'm gonna dump the salt into the water, and then we're gonna stir it around until it's totally dissolved. It may seem like a lot of salt, but most of this is gonna leach out of the noodles when we boil them. Once you don't feel any more salt crystals at the bottom of the cup, we're ready to make the dough. I'm gonna add the brine to the flour in 3 to 4 additions, and then I'm gonna use my hand to whisk it in. The idea here is to evenly hydrate the flour so you don't end up with big clumps of sticky dough. By the way, I'm using Japanese churikiko, which has a gluten content of 8 to 9%. All-purpose flour will work, but if you're in the US, you may notice that the dough turns gray rather than yellow. Apparently, this has something to do with the minerals in American flour, but it shouldn't have a big impact on the taste of the noodles. Okay, let's add a little more brine. As you add more water, you may see it start to clump up, but try and break up the clumps so you end up with shaggy pieces of dough that are about the same size. Once we've added all the brine and there are no dry spots left, we're gonna knead this together into a ball. But first, let's go ahead and put down a damp towel so the bowl doesn't move all over the place. That's better. Like I was saying, I'm gonna knead this together into a cohesive ball of dough. Now it's time for our workout. We're gonna transfer the dough to a clean countertop, and we're gonna knead the heck out of it to develop the gluten in the flour. This is what's gonna give our udon its slick, chewy texture, so you don't wanna skimp on this. So when I'm kneading this, I'm pressing with my whole body. You can see I'm pushing my weight into it. This dough is really tough, so if you were to kind of just sit here like this, it's just gonna take forever. So you wanna really just kind of lean your whole weight. You can use 1 or 2 hands into it, and you can see it kind of flattens out, and then I'm just gonna tuck it back over like this and then roll it out again and just keep repeating that over and over. As you knead, the dough is going to become more elastic, which can make it difficult to work with. So you can put one hand on top of the other to get some more power into each stroke. And when you've done this a few hundred times, you should be able to kind of stretch it out and smooth off the top like this. And we're gonna go ahead and put it back into the bowl. We'll cover it with a lid so it doesn't get all dried out and crusty. And we'll be back in about 2 hours. Okay, the dough has rested for about 2 hours now, which should have allowed the gluten to relax. This step is super important for any dough that you need to roll into a specific shape, like noodles or pizza. Otherwise, the long elastic chains of gluten are stretched tight in different directions, and the dough just won't do what you want it to. To roll the dough out, I'm going to be using potato starch because it's better at keeping the dough from sticking than flour. But if that's all you have, flour will work too. The first thing I'm going to do is flatten the dough into a thick disc using my hands. Then I'm going to use a rolling pin, applying medium pressure to press the dough out from the center in steps. Now we're going to bring the rolling pin back to the center and press the dough out towards us. Next, I'm going to rotate the dough 90 degrees and press from the center out. And then press from the center in. Now we can roll the dough out from the center and then in from the center. Rotate the dough 90 degrees again, and then roll out from the center and in from the center. By repeating this a few times, you can see how the dough is rolling out into a nice square. Now I'm going to give the dough and rolling pin a generous coating of starch, and I'm going to roll the sheet of dough onto the rolling pin, starting from one corner. Then I'm going to roll the dough out on the rolling pin like this. You want to apply even pressure across the whole rolling pin so the dough ends up the same thickness. Notice how I'm rolling my hands out from the center. This method is great because it rolls out the dough in both directions, so you're able to maintain a nice square without having to turn the thin dough a bunch of times. When the dough is about 1/8 of an inch thick, I'm going to unroll it and turn it 45 degrees. Now we're going to dust it with starch again and roll it up with a straight edge along the rolling pin. This fixes any difference in thickness that may have occurred because the dough was overlapping in parts. If everything went well, you should end up with a fairly square sheet of dough that's about 1/8 of an inch thick from edge to edge. If the shape isn't perfect, it's not the end of the world, but you do want to try and roll it so it's uniform in thickness. Now we're going to dust this with starch again and fold the dough up so we can slice it. How you fold it is up to you, but there are two important points here. The first is that you need to stagger the folds so that they're not right on top of each other. Otherwise, those areas are going to end up flatter than others when you cut the noodles. The second thing is to be generous with the starch so the noodles don't stick together. Okay, let's get this onto a cutting board and cut the noodles up. You'll want to use a big sharp knife, and it's best to cut through the dough in one stroke without applying too much downward pressure. How thick you cut the noodles is up to you, but keep in mind that they're going to double in thickness when you boil them. Once you've cut some of these up, you'll want to separate the individual strands so they don't have a chance to stick back together again. Once they're separated, I like to curl them up into little nests like this. This recipe should make about 4 servings of udon, so I'm gonna split the noodles up into 4 nests. These should keep in the fridge for about 4 to 5 days, but if you plan on storing them, be sure to give them an extra coating of starch so they don't stick together. I often hear from you guys that I make cooking look easy, but that's because it usually is. The thing is, udon is a little more complicated, and I'd be lying to you if I told you it was easy. With this recipe though, you should be able to get edible noodles on the first try. Just don't expect them to look perfect. I've been at this for a few months now, and mine still don't look quite as good as the ones that come out of the factory. But the thing is, the texture of these is way better than packaged udon, so it's totally worth the effort. Okay, enough talking, let's boil some of these up. I've got a large pot of boiling water here, and I'm gonna go ahead and drop the noodles in. The thickness of the udon is going to determine how long you need to cook them for, but for these ones, I usually let them boil for about 12 minutes. While the noodles are boiling, I'm gonna chop up some scallions and grate some ginger. Just be sure to keep an eye on the pot because udon has a tendency to boil over. As the noodles cook, they'll go from opaque to slightly translucent, so this is a good indicator that they're done. Okay, these are looking good, so let's drain them. Regardless of whether you're serving these hot or cold, the boiling liquid is extremely starchy, so you'll want to rinse them under cold water first. I usually put them in a bowl and give them a good rub with my hands to get rid of as much of that excess starch as possible. It's still summer here, so I'm gonna serve these cold, but if you want to have these hot, you can heat them up in hot water or just pour a bunch of boiling hot broth over them. I have a recipe for mentsu on the blog, which is a concentrated noodle broth that you can use straight for cold udon, or you can dilute it with hot water to turn this into a noodle soup, so check the description down below for a link. Udon takes a bit of time and effort to make, and it could take a lifetime to master these techniques, but the slick, bouncy texture of these is so addictive, and I just can't imagine going back to store-bought noodles. Udon noodles are ridiculously versatile, and making them at home is a great weekend project to do with kids, so I hope you'll give it a try. If you enjoyed this video, let me know you want to see more like it by giving this a big thumbs up and by sharing it with all your friends that love noodles. This video took time and money to produce, which is why I'm so thankful to my patrons who helped to fund this. If you're learning something new from my videos, I hope you'll consider clicking the link up here to join the No Recipes crew and help support our future videos. Well, I'm gonna go slurp up this plate of noodles, but I'll catch you in the next one.